Rich, September's right around the corner, man. I mean, best ball summer is basically over. Do you have any favorite memories from the summer that we just had?
I enjoyed a lot of the chaotic transactions, the Jonnu Smith and Brian Robinson trades, especially, but nothing was more entertaining than Ricky Pearsall dying and then being resurrected again from the questionable tag on DraftKings.
Yeah, I definitely have one memory that will stick. That I'm just so pleased that it happened to me. Yesterday I was in a draft and Jalen Hurts fell to the late 5th round, so I got naked Hurts, and I said to myself, you know what? I'll draft Dallas Goedert ahead of ADP and get a stack. Except someone else in my league took Dallas Goedert 40 spots ahead of ADP.
I'm JJ, and last year I tried my hardest to become a best ball bro. I drafted over 500 teams, I talked to some of the most successful best ball players in existence, and I admittedly had mixed results. So this year, I'm going to chase that title once again. My plan is to max enter DraftKings Millionaire Maker, and I'm going to document all of it while talking to the brightest best ball minds on the planet. Last year, I didn't quite get there, but this year, this is going to be the year where I officially become a best ball bro.
This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 best ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's 2 chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get 1 bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro, the finale of Season 2. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by my co-host Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
Doing good, man. Bittersweet end to the summer. It means the best ball season is coming to a close, at least the draft season. But then that means football is right around the corner. For your podcast feed, you start going with your natural cadence next week. So it's right there. So it is sad a little bit, but super excited for the football to come.
Yeah, look, lots of content coming. You know, you're going to have 5 new podcasts and episodes every single week within the podcast feed. And obviously, Rich, you help a lot with the disbursement of those podcasts and helping with video content and such. I'm excited. I'm also, like you said, it's a little bittersweet where we had this summer of best ball drafting. We had these ebbs and flows of guys who were drafted way too low at certain points. We've watched their ADPs rise and vice versa. And we were on the good and bad end of that throughout the summer, I would say. But like we did last year, and like people ask for, with the show, they're always saying, JJ, what's your exposure look like? Like, where are you guys at with how you're drafting, and just curiosity with all that. So that's how I sort of finish this season, or this is how we finished last season, at least. So I figured we'd finish this season the same way. I'll go over all my exposure, talk about players that I'm higher on, lower on, just from an exposure standpoint. Also talk a little CLV and see which players I basically have the most value with. I'll go through all of that. And then, get out of here with some parting thoughts and my first year max entering the Millie over on DraftKings. Technically, the numbers I'm going to share today are through 146 drafts because there is still this week that I'm going to be live streaming drafts, and I want to save some of them for those live streams, but I only have 4 left. So these numbers are more or less, reflective of what my portfolio looks like. But I'm excited. And as I do this, I'm sure you'll have some, ADP insights and such with these guys, but let's just get to it, I guess. Let's look at quarterback first. I mean, like most seasons, I'll actually say this overall. I have very flat exposure across the board, not really by choice, just kind of how things turned out. I'm even flatter than I was last year. Part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that I like a lot more late round players this year. I like a lot more players this year. I think the pool in general is deeper than where we were at last year. I mean, think of it this way. Like last year, I was really into like Jaleel McLaughlin, right? Where like those types of players that, you could easily see the downside case for those guys. There's just so many more players than a player like McLaughlin out there this year. And I'm excited about that. And so I split things up a little bit more than I otherwise would. Did you kind of notice the same thing as you were drafting this year?
Yeah, I just felt way more comfortable at the end of drafts. And I think part of that too was what we've seen all summer with the quarterback market. All of those guys getting pushed up. It just, I don't know, at the end of these drafts, instead of maybe picking off a late round quarterback like we were in the previous season, I just felt comfortable with a lot of the running back and receiver options that were out there, either filling out stacks that I had been working on or just single players that had, tentpole upside in any given week. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's like the rookie class was pretty good. Like I thought the wide receiver class was totally fine, even though it's not as good as last year's. And the running back class, obviously.
Yeah, we've been talking about the running back class since way before the draft. And even though none of these guys went to some of the smash spots like Dallas that everybody was drooling over, there's so much talent in this class. And one thing you've always looked at with pass catching, there's so much pass catching talent in this class that, yeah, we can see these guys have spike weeks on the teams that took them.
Yeah. And then the other like constant theme that you're going to hear on today's show is that I really liked the late 4th into the 5th through the 6th and into the early 7th wide receivers. And when you like players at that position, arguably the most important position because you're drafting the most of them in best ball. When you like a lot of players in that range, that means you're going to not get a lot of other players at other positions in that range. And so, you'll hear some of my exposure here in a second, and that will be reflected in that. I think that's where there's the most differentiation in exposure, but I'll go through it. Let's talk quarterback first. My top 5 quarterbacks by exposure. Drake May is sitting at number 1. This is just Millie exposure for the record. I did other drafts as well, but I want to focus on the 20 million or the $20 entry, Millie contest that we've been promoting all summer long and talking about all summer long. Drake May is my number 1 quarterback at 17%. I do have some, I got him lower than where his closing, ADP is likely going to be. So I feel pretty good about that. Bryce Young is another one that I'm pretty high on. At 16%, Bryce Young. That was more of a, late round, I need a stack kind of situation where you can get some of those pieces late, Jatavian Sanders or whomever. You can get them late. I also like Bryce Young. Like I think behind a good offensive line, you get Tedero McMillan. He averaged 5 points per game with his legs when he came back off the bench last year and 18 points per game in standard scoring leagues. So I like Young this year as just like a really super late, more of like a super flex type quarterback and maybe a waiver wire guy as the season goes on. But I definitely like him in best ball. No one's going to be shocked by the next one at 14% is Jordan Love. I just love the Green Bay passing attack this year. I started drafting a lot more Jacobs towards the end of the season. So I didn't get, as much of that 2-3 turn Jacobs because he did rise a little bit with all the other just stuff going on, with players in that range. But I like the Packers in general. I mean, it's a very solid, consistent offense that we know is going to be fringe top 10, if not solidly in the top 10 in touchdowns per game. They're going to throw the ball a lot more this year just based on regression. Jordan Love was a guy that was easy to stack with Tucker Kraft or like a Matthew Golden or Jaden Reed. And then obviously Romeo Doubs, who was one of the easiest clicks and easiest values, I think, all summer. So Jordan Love at 14%. Trevor Lawrence, again, probably not that big of a shock. He's also at 14%. I got him obviously with Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter a lot. but I also got him with De'Ami Brown and some of the running backs and Brenton Strange and going that route and really just punting and getting a late stack. And then the last one, do I feel great about it? No, I don't feel that great about it, but it is Rich's Jets, right, Justin Fields. His ADP has been so strange to me all summer, right? I'm at 13% Fields, so he's my number 5. His ADP has been so strange to me all summer because we've gone from, he was like a solid, I don't know, I think like an early 9th round pick or something on DraftKings, like late 8th, to then going like two rounds later with like the toe injury and stuff. And then he didn't really bounce back from that, partially I think because the Jets offenses just looked inept all August and late July. And so people were just nervous and scared. As you being the Jets homer among the two of us, what do you think the odds are, if you were to put like a percentage here, the odds that Justin Fields does not play if he's healthy? Basically, what are the odds that he gets benched?
Ooh, extremely low. I would say, this is like a 20% outcome of him just getting straight up benched because of performance. Yeah.
Because like I've shared my thought, like I'm in a super flex draft, for instance, and I drafted Justin Fields at like QB 15. And I don't feel, like super, super nervous that he's going to get benched just because they're going to want to get as much out to see what they have in him. What is the use of using Tyrod Taylor, late in the season, in my opinion? I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, obviously they can do anything, so I could easily be wrong, but I think logically it makes sense to just let Fields play as long as he's healthy.
I think the Fields thing, it makes intuitive sense that he struggled in the preseason because he's basically just been playing drop back quarterback in preseason and in mini camps and these joint practices because that's what they want him to improve at. And we know that Justin Fields isn't the most accurate quarterback and is not a pure drop back passer, but that's what they're trying to improve upon. They're not going to put him in harm's way and have designed running plays before the lights turn on. That would be dumb. That'd be very stupid. So every read option, every run concept that they ran in the preseason was always a straight handoff, right? Yeah. Because why would you run your quarterback in the preseason? So he's going to be a different guy.
Hopefully. I mean, for my bags, hopefully. And then I try to list notable players who I have low exposure on, and I don't love to say this because they're awesome. It's Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. It's not really by choice. They're at 4%. I wish I was at 6-7% probably with them. And maybe my final 4 teams, I'm going to force it a little bit more. I'm doing a lot of like the $59 ones right now, and I'm getting them there. So I will have some exposure. But it just goes back to, what's going on in that area of the draft typically. If I knew what I knew now back in May and June, I would have gotten way more Lamar in round 3. I think going elite quarterback at this point in round 3 is pretty viable because a lot of players just kind of fell off, and, there's question marks about Matthew Stafford, and, there's just a lot of stuff going on where that round 3 is like, well, we're kind of in no man's land, so I'll just take a quarterback here and just feel good about Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. I wish I would have done that. So that was the mistake. But overall, the reason why I don't have crazy exposure to these guys is just because I liked a lot of the late round quarterbacks. I'm going with a lot of 3 quarterback builds, and then the opportunity cost is still there, and it still exists for those guys, in those early rounds. But I think in hindsight, definitely would have rather within the milli been closer to like 6-7% with those elite guys. I think I am around, I'm over 8% with Jalen Hurts because I just liked his value. I think I'm at like 9-10%. And then Josh Allen, I think I'm around 7 or 8%. So I'm there with Allen. It's just Lamar and Jaden Daniels, kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit. It wasn't really by choice, but I do want to be honest with where things are at with my portfolio, and that's where they're at. And then from like a CLV standpoint, I don't think it's like a huge deal at quarterback where like nothing major has happened, where we've seen CLV being, where I drafted them versus what that closing line ADP, if you will, would be. Nothing's really shifted that dramatically at quarterback for me to say like, oh, I'm getting a mass, we're not seeing injuries happen or hype trains happen the same way at quarterback. So there's not really any CLV to like throw out there and to chat about. But I do want to at least note that Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels are lower than I anticipated and wanted.
Yeah, I can tell you within the top 160 picks currently on DraftKings, there is only one quarterback whose draft value has changed double-digit spots during training camp, and it is Justin Fields down 13.5 spots. So you're not going to have variance at this position. And then overall, the year, I don't know, not good for branding, but the mid-round quarterback, all of the 5 quarterbacks that you listed that you're above weight, 10th, 11th, 12th, or 13th round picks currently on DraftKings.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in like a season-long league that's still late in a best ball environment.
In this 20 round.
That's because it's 20 rounds, so it's the middle of the draft. Let's move on to running back. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit more interesting for people than quarterback is. And look, the quarterbacks I named, Drake May, Bryce Young, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, aside from Fields, but even Fields to a degree, you're going to see the trickle-down effect of that because, if I'm drafting the quarterbacks, I'm obviously drafting the pass catchers and other players from those teams. But running back, my number one exposure is only at 19%. And
Did we ever talk about this guy? Was this name ever uttered on the podcast?
Well, so it's Rico Dowdle. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that we've really gone that deep in talking about Dowdle aside from, he was just one of those guys that was late that could get some work and then obviously has contingent upside with an injury. But to me, I'll go through, I'll just say right now, notable players with lower exposure. I am only at 1% Chuba Hubbard. And I don't love that. I do wish I was more at like 3 or 4% just to get a little bit more comfortable. But I just love the wide receivers in that range so much that I was just getting the falling value in that tier as opposed to going after Chuba. And I have my hesitations about Chuba Hubbard this year, where I genuinely think that Dowdle is going to see a little bit of work. And then me drafting Dowdle, I think is much more of a best ball play than a season long play where I don't think it's going to be predictable. I just think that there's a chance he sees like 30% of the team's backfield share. And if that happens, then he might have some usable weeks here and there. And then, oh, by the way, what if all of the stuff that I've researched about pass catching backs and the low yards per out run with Chuba Hubbard and them bringing in Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne, what if that translates? I actually have it like 8% Trevor Etienne too, which is not something that I'm very proud of, but we'll see what happens there.
Well, and if you're going to fade Chuba Hubbard, you should correlate them with these clicks as well, right? Like that just makes sense. You might as well go all in. Draft if you're right. Yeah,
I guess there's an argument to make that you can make if you say, I hate this backfield, I don't want anything to do with the situation, then you just don't take any of them. Or if you say, I really like this backfield, because technically, I'm overweight on both Breece Hall and Braylon Allen right now. I'm not by a lot. I mean, Breece, I think I'm at 9 or 10%, and Braylon Allen, I'm at 12 or 13%. But, that's a situation where there's contingent upside. I think they're going to just be really run heavy. Is the ceiling going to be there from a season long perspective as much? Probably not. But I think a weekly one, we could see, that ceiling hit. And look, with Carolina, I actually think, and I've said this before, I think Chuba Hubbard is a pretty good candidate to match his ADP, to come through with an RB 15 to 20 type performance. But my issue is there's just, again, wide receiver matters so much in best ball / in a full PPR environment. And that range is just rich there's just so many good wide receivers in that area that have league winning upside that I just didn't want to pass on them, and maybe that'll be wrong. And this is just a stand that I've taken. Chuba's going to go nuts the first month of the season because their schedule is really good. But yeah, I mean, Rico Dowdle is the sort of inverse of the Chuba fade. So I've gotten a lot of Rico. Now, by far my biggest mistake of drafts this summer is the next guy. And we talked about this last week. It's Jalen Wright. I have 18% Jalen Wright. And people who just heard that, they winced a little bit. You guys hopefully feel for me because, right now, as every day passes, things get worse for Jalen Wright, where now they're talking about surgery. Not that that's going to happen, but the fact that that was even brought up when none of us even remotely thought that was a thing, a week ago. And then obviously, I'm more mad at myself about the Jalen Wright stuff because I, leaned into some beat reporter stuff and a lot of the Jalen Wright exposure, for the record, is from early to mid July. So it really didn't continue at a high pace in late July and into August. It's just, I got a ton of him early on because my thought was Ollie Gordon versus Alexander Madison. We don't know which one is going to be, the bigger bodied kind of early down type potential workhorse kind of player for that backfield. And then Alexander Madison, his injury happens. And I wish I just would have been more aggressive in going after Ollie Gordon after that happened because, number one, I had a lot of Jalen Wright, so I should hedge a little bit. But number two, go read the prospect guide and read what I said about Ollie Gordon. Like, I'm not even taking my own advice. It's really frustrating. Like that, when I go back and I look back at a season, I do the things that I missed episode. And sometimes I miss things that the process was fine and I'm not really mad about it. And hopefully that's the majority of the cases. This is one of those cases where I was just a bonehead. Like, I was an idiot and I wish that it didn't happen, but that's how things have gone. And I don't have nearly enough Ollie Gordon versus where I would want to be with Ollie Gordon. So now I'm trying to get as much as I can in season long and in redraft. But yeah, so Jalen Wright, he's a mistake. If I can get like 2 to 3 usable weeks from him, though, I think it's going to be fine, because we're talking about a 16th to 20th round pick. It's not, if this is my biggest mistake, that's probably not a bad thing, because like there were other instances where I feel pretty good about my stances and such. But this one was not one of them. And I say this too, when it comes to Wright, and I'll get to another player in a second, but I say that, I was reading into beat reports a little bit too much and I was kind of going on vibes more than anything else with Wright. And that is, the case to a degree. I also didn't think he was like a horrible prospect. I think he fits in this offense, and he actually did have pretty good per rush numbers last year within the offense. But the one thing that I'll say is I also did that for some other players and it worked. So I don't want to dismiss that idea completely.
I was also going to say some of the CLV hits that we're going to talk about after you talk about the guys you have lower exposure on. Like, these are the things that are going to happen when you have a wide portfolio, right? Like, you can't have all smashes, right? Yeah. Especially, again, like you're saying, before he sunk like a rock due to this injury, he was going at pick 167 at the start of training camp. So this is a, late 14th, 15th round pick, right? Yeah. Obviously not optimal if we're going to get a bunch of zeros, but this is a late round player that is going to hurt us. Yeah.
The next player is Jerome Ford, who's at 18%. Now, I actually feel pretty good about the Ford exposure because a lot of it was actually before anything went down with the Quinshon Judkins. Like, I was drafting Jerome Ford when Quinshon Judkins, before like we learned this horrific thing that went on, off the field. So I was drafting Ford because I saw a situation where, yes, there was a 3-headed backfield, but there's 2 rookies. Neither of them are necessarily reliable as pass catchers. And they're likely going to go with the veteran as the, negative game script type back. And then all of a sudden the Quinshon Judkins thing dropped. And yeah, Jerome Ford's ADP rose, but it didn't rise that much. And now we've gone through this roller coaster because then obviously the charges with Judkins were dropped, but he's still not on the Browns. He hasn't signed. Now there's rumors that he's going to go back to college. And, there's a lot of stuff going on with Judkins, which is wild. And all the while, like, Jerome Ford's ADP is kind of course it's moved, but it's been relatively static when you consider the situation, like when you consider what's really been going on in Cleveland. So I'm at 18% Jerome Ford. It's not a position where I'm like, he's a league winner. It's a position of, I got, he's my RB5 or RB6, and maybe I had a 0 RB or hero RB team, and I just needed some production late in the draft. And that's something that I've learned through doing this show over the last couple of years, is that you just want production. You want guys who are giving you something during the season and down the stretch. I think Jerome Ford can at least be that guy.
Jerome Ford finished last summer, pick 119 in best ball when we did the podcast last year. That was his closing ADP going into last season. We're entering this season where he's the only vet projected to get meaningful volume on that team. And he's going at pick, I just had it up, pick 160, I think, right now, pick 154. Yeah. So, it's one of those where we know the role, we know the player, we know the pass catching ability. And yeah, despite the Quinshon Judkins roller coaster, Jerome Ford's value has not been impacted.
Yeah, and look, this is not a negative Dylan Sampson thing either. I've drafted Dylan Sampson a decent bit, and I think Sampson's the better like redraft and season-long selection because the upside is definitely more so in his court than it is Jerome Ford's. But from a best ball perspective, I've just liked Ford, especially on a full PPR platform like DraftKings. Another 18%er is Justice Hill, and this is a very similar argument with Jerome Ford. If the Ravens are in a negative game script, they are more than likely using Justice Hill, who is a good pass catching back. He's explosive and he's good in pass pro. And there was that quote earlier, it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago from Todd Monken when he was talking about Keaton Mitchell. And he was like, yeah, it's just going to be hard for Keaton to get on the field because we have two running backs that are really good. That was not exactly what he said, but it was along those lines. And it just made me feel better about Justice Hill, to be honest with you. It just told me that he's going to play that same role that he played last year. And if that's the case, and if Baltimore sees maybe 5 or 6 negative game scripts, or even if they're not a negative game script, he could just break one and just have a big play. And so I think that he was just an easy click, especially with all those Jordan Love and Green Bay teams that I had as a week 17 bring back. And then the last one, I guess I have 2 more. Another 18%. So my fourth 18%er is Bashal Tutin. He's just the guy. I think that he has league winning upside, and I like targeting that Jacksonville backfield. You guys know how I feel about Tutin. He's my favorite value of that group. Do I think that his front half of the season is going to be better than the other backs in that backfield? No, not necessarily. But do I think that he has more upside than anyone else in that backfield? Yes, I do. So that's more of the league winning type dart. And then the last one is a player that I didn't really like as a prospect much at all, but I've drafted him in round 20 pretty consistently. It's Kyle Monangai. And the thing that made me feel better about Monangai is when Ben Johnson came. And look, this is what happens with the running back position. You have to lead with coach speak, at least to some degree, right? Ben Johnson came out and he said that Monangai is going to have production in like October or in the fall or something like that. And that told me that, okay, his job security is at least there, right? I know he's been banged up recently, so who knows what happens, but not someone that I'm like enamored with from a season long perspective, because I don't think the pass catching is going to be there. But I think there's a chance that he's an early down bruiser type for them and that he scores some touchdowns this year. So I got Monangai at 17%, a decent clip. I've got more Monangai than Roshan, because I was drafting Roshan a lot early and I ended up at like 11-12%. Wish I didn't have that much, but 17% Monangai, kind of leaning into the offense and hoping for the best.
Just to pivot real quick to redraft, there is no team that I am looking forward to laying my eyes on play football week 1 than Monday Night Football Chicago Bears. What is Ben Johnson going to do? What is this running back rotation going to be? How are the targets going to be dispersed between all those players? Like, I'm fascinated to see it. And yeah, both Monangai and Roshan Johnson have that questionable tag now on DraftKings. And I was doing a draft this morning and they just fall like rocks. So if you're making Bear stack, if you're stacking that game 17, I think they're both solid options because people are avoiding them like the plague right now.
And then notable players with lower exposure. Brian Robinson, I'm at 2%. That's not a shock. That ended up working out real well. Quinshon Judkins is at 1%. That ended up working well. Chuba, like I mentioned, I'm only at 1% because the wide receivers in that range. DeAndre Swift, it's the exact same reason as Chuba. I'm at 3% Swift. That could easily come back to bite me. I don't even think he's like that bad of a pick on paper. And then the other two, who I think are great picks, I just haven't gotten a lot of them because I like the wide receivers in the range more. It's, early second round wide receivers. I've gotten them over Ashton Genty. So I'm only at 4% Genty. And I'm only at 4% Alvin Kamara as well because of the wide receivers in that range. I think Kamara, though, to me, Kamara is like quintessential better in season long than he would be in best ball. But, both of those guys, I'm not fading at all. It's just the way that drafts kind of came to be. And then let's talk CLV, because I think this is one of the more interesting conversations to have on the show today. We'll start at the bottom, actually. We'll start with Braylon Allen. I'm at 12% exposure. And so, but the reason why I'm bringing him up, because I've gotten really good value on him. The market was slow to move with Braylon Allen. I noticed like we were hearing pretty consistent drum beats out of New York about them using him more, that he was having a good camp and all this stuff. And you could still get him pretty late, even in like late July. So I have 12% exposure. He's not at that 18% or whatever, but my average pick for him has been 174th overall. And right now he's like 128th or so. So I got a lot of good value out of Braylon Allen. So obviously if he has a good season, that'll really help my overall portfolio. Travion Henderson, someone that I was into as a prospect, someone that I was into, as early as May, when he got drafted by New England and I started doing these Millie drafts. I have 13% Travion exposure. My average pick for him has been 63.1. So like that 5-6 turn, I was drafting him in that 5-6 turn constantly. And he is currently going at more so the 3-4 turn. So I gained a whole round in equity there. And then the big one is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So my average pick, and this is kind of braggy for sure, but
stun on him.
The nature of the show.
my average pick. So I'm at 12% exposure for Bill. Okay. And by the way, a lot of early drafts, he was not even being drafted. So there is a little bit of an edge that you would have in having him, in those environments. But that's when I was getting him, because my average pick for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is 227th overall. So I was just getting him in the 20th round, and I was getting him a lot in the 20th round. And now he is going in the top 100 pretty comfortably. So if Bill has a special season, if he has like that Alfred Morris season, there's a good chance that my Millie teams are in pretty good shape.
That's the one, right? That is a massive hit. And like I said, when you have a portfolio this large, like you're going to have some misses, and it's worthwhile to have some misses when you can have some massive hits like this. Bill up 137 spots since training camp started. But on that Braylon Allen, I want to affirm what you were saying. Up 52.5 spots, Braylon Allen is since the start of training camp.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like there were some instances where people reacted really harshly, like Ollie Gordon. People reacted really heavily and quickly to Ollie Gordon, but they weren't doing that to guys like Allen and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. All right, let's move on to wide receiver. The haters are going to hate to hear this. The haters will not enjoy when I say Rome Odunze is my number one exposed wide receiver in the Millie at 19%. I think that if you look at my rankings, he's only one tier below DJ Moore, and they're like 5 spots apart in overall ADP. One of my bold predictions may or may not be later this week. If you subscribe to the late round newsletter where I send out the final 5 predictions that I did not include on the podcast, I think Rome Odunze could outscore DJ Moore this year, just straight up. Like, I don't see why that's even that bold. I've liked the Bears offense. I like Odunze as a high variance play, so I drafted him a lot in that range. The next one's Devontae Smith. That really shouldn't be that much of a surprise to people. He is a relatively inconsistent player, so maybe you're not totally in love from a season-long perspective. I don't care as much about that kind of thing, especially in deeper formats where you're just kind of you got a long lineup and you're just throwing guys in your lineup, and you're going to have to take the valleys with the peaks. So it's a lot easier to draft him in those kind of, if you have a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex kind of league, you might not be as interested in Devontae Smith. I think Smith is a great pick though this year. The Eagles are going to throw the ball probably 120 plus more times than they did last year. We've seen him with really good contingent upside when AJ Brown or Dallas Goedert go down. So I'm at 18% Devontae Smith. Ricky Pearsall, I'll get to him. I'll talk about Pearsall later too. But Ricky Pearsall, I'm at 18%. I bought him a lot when the pup tag went up on next to his name, because it was very clear that he was not going to miss the season or anything. It was just wild that he was falling to the 9th round. So I got a lot of them there. De'Ami Brown is at 18%. Do I feel great about this? Absolutely not. But let's see what happens. This just goes back to the Trevor Lawrence thing. I would draft Trevor Lawrence and say to myself, all right, I got to get a stack later. I'll get De'Ami Brown. And then also I could take him standalone. I think he's going to be used in the offense. So I don't think he's going to be a 0, and you could often get him in the 19th round. So I just went that direction. And then the last one, unfortunately, is Khalil Shakir. And I say unfortunately for 2 reasons. Number one, I did a little bit more research this offseason on the slot type guys like him and Jaden Reed, and I became more bearish about those types of players. So that's the first thing. The second thing is he got injured, right? So I'm at 17% Shakir. I wish I was at more 10%. It would make me feel a lot better. And I did not, I have negative value with him just because I was drafting him before the injury. And then obviously the injury happened and he dropped a round and a half. So those are my top wide receiver exposures. Notable players with lower exposure include Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3%, which, I mean, look, that could bite me for sure, but I am just nervous that nothing really changed in that offense. And there were, Devontae Adams in that range. There was even Kyron or some of the, James Cook towards the end, and now Travion, and then George Kittle. There were just other players I preferred more, in that spot. Amarian Hampton at times. And so I don't have that much Marvin Harrison Jr., 3%. DJ Moore, 5%. Honestly, shocked that it's at 5% even, because I'm really low on Moore this year. And then Terry McLaurin, I'm at 5%. I bought him a little bit when he was falling into the 5th, but I just think he's a big regression candidate. And now I'm even more nervous because even though he got that deal, he could start the season off a little bit slow. All right, let's talk CLV with these wide receivers. My top 3
values, the guys that I need to do well this year, just based on where I drafted them. Keenan Allen is one of them. I have 10% exposure with Keenan Allen, and the average pick is 193rd overall, and now he's going 110th overall. So 10% exposure with that feels pretty good. Emeka Egbuka, I don't think anyone's shocked by this. I'm at 11% exposure. I got him on average at 92nd overall, which is kind of shocking to think about whenever you consider where he's at now, which is 52nd overall. So that feels really good. And then a guy I talked about, Ricky Pearsall, 18% exposure. The average pick for me was 81st overall, and he's now going 58th overall. So that one, to me, like if I were to bucket running back and wide receiver and pick one guy who I think I have the most leverage on the field with, it's probably JCM. It's probably Bill at running back, and then it's probably Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver.
Yeah, and with this Ayuk injury, with the ambiguity around Juwan Jennings, and just that entire receiver room as a whole in San Francisco, I mean, the arrow is pointing straight up for Ricky Pearsall to smash. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Let's move on to tight end. Not as fun as running back and wide receiver, but I think that the number one guy that I have from an exposure standpoint is kind of interesting because he's an early round pick. It's Trey McBride. A lot of the McBride exposure has to do with the fact that I got a decent amount of like 101s, 102s in drafts, but then also he was an easy click for the most part. Like he was a safe option. You know, there wasn't much of the up and downness to his profile versus some of the other guys that were going in that range. Like I said earlier, there was that drop off. So sometimes he would inch into the third round, and he was just the last guy before there was that drop off. So Trey McBride at 16%. And I liked him and his opportunity cost more than Brock Bowers and Bowers' opportunity cost. Brenton Strange, just going back to the Trevor Lawrence stuff, 15% Brenton Strange. Jatavian Sanders, going back to the Bryce Young stuff, he's at 14%. And then I have three tight ends tied at 13%. Theo Johnson, who I feel great about now. Like right now, it feels like if Theo Johnson's a top 15 wide receiver this year, when we look back on the season, I don't think anyone should be like shocked. He's got a great athletic profile. You know, there's not that many like solid, solidified pass catchers in New York outside of Malik Neighbors. And that's something that we should always look for. And he's an ascending talent. So Theo Johnson, I think, is really intriguing. Tucker Kraft is at 13% as well. I've talked about him enough on the show that I don't need to bring him up anymore. And then the last one's Tyler Higbee. This was more earlier on before the Matthew Stafford stuff really happened. And, you know, I think that there's a chance that Terrence Ferguson is more of like a 2026 guy, just based on his like prospect profile and stuff. And so I got Higbee as a 20th round pick pretty frequently. Probably wish I didn't have 13%. Probably wish it was more like 10%, but you know, it's a 20th round pick. Hopefully it's not that big of a deal.
And this is emblematic of something that you and the guests have spoken about all summer. Of at tight end, you either go elite or you wait. Yeah. And that's very emblematic in the players that you just touched on. You either took McBride early in this respect, or you waited and you paired guys with quarterbacks who you had previously selected just to get those stacks going.
Yeah, and if you look at the players with lower exposure, it plays into that even more. Well, first off, Jonnu Smith is one of them. I have 1% Jonnu Smith. I don't know. To me, I don't think that there is an obvious candidate of which tight end I prefer more between Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith in the Steelers offense. And so I haven't spent the premium to get Jonnu. Maybe that'll be wrong, but I don't know if that'll really burn me just given the offense that he's in and stuff. And then the other two are Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce. You know, Laporta I've gotten in some of the other contests. So him being at 3%, it's, you know, my overall portfolio, he's a little bit higher. But Travis Kelce, I've not really been drafting that heavily. I'll get him when he falls, but I'm nervous. I mean, he's engaged now, as we learned today. No, but for real, he basically fell within every peripheral outside of target share last year, and now there's more competition back in that Kansas City lineup. I'm just nervous about Kelce this season. And then when it comes to like CLV, I don't think there's really anything to note. I didn't get enough Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren that I wanted before their prices rose. Like, I like them a good bit. I'm more at like 6% or 7% or something like that. I wish I was overweight, but I do have good CLV with them. Like like I was getting them in like, you know, round 11 and stuff whenever they were getting drafted there. And now, I mean, Tyler Warren, especially, he goes like late 6th at times. And it's just, to me, I can't do that, in this kind of environment. I can see the argument for the ceiling. I get all of that, but I also am a little bit worried about the opportunity cost at that point in time. And I don't see a really big difference between him and Tucker Kraft personally. And so I'm just going to get Kraft like 4 or 5 rounds later and not have to worry about that opportunity cost. So I haven't gotten Warren at his new cost. Loveland hasn't moved as much. I'll still draft him. And then Kyle Pitts is another one. A little bit of value for me with Pitts, but I'm still at like 6%. So nothing like major at tight end, but I don't think there's been that much movement at tight end outside of Tyler Warren. I wish I would have been, more aggressive with Warren earlier on.
Those are the only 2 guys. Loveland sneakily up 2 rounds since the start of training camp. Up 23.3 spots. But Tyler Warren up 33 spots. And again, when I was doing that draft this morning, the one thing that really perplexed me is I started to see some steam for some of the Colts, but not Daniel Jones. Like Daniel Jones did get the requisite steam of being named starter, but he's still going in the 16th. And we know that quarterback is a desert after round 13. So still being able to get Daniel Jones in round 16 as opposed to whatever, round 18 or 19 previously. I was surprised to see him not steam up closer to that real back end of established starters, given the fact that I don't know how quickly they'll give the reins back to Anthony Richardson outside of an injury.
It's a really hard situation to dissect. In the back of my mind, if you were to say, you got to give me an answer, give me your projection and prediction of what's going to happen with the Colts, I'd say that the more likely quarterback to start week 17 is Anthony Richardson. If I were to like throw a prediction out there, I'm not drafting as if that's the case per se, but I do think that there are a lot of outs and avenues where that could end up being the case. Like if you go Anthony Richardson to start the year, then that means once you bench him, you're done. Like you're not going back to him ever again. At least with this, you can maybe get, like if you're Shane Steichen and you start really poorly with Daniel Jones, you say, just give me a shot with Anthony Richardson before I get fired. And what if he shows something, right? And then all of a sudden you get that extra year. And I mean, for Colts fans, I hope that doesn't happen. Let's pray that doesn't happen.
I'm so bearish on the Texans, and I think I'm kind of bearish on the Jags just because of how, and this is not from a best ball output, this is just my projecting the team output into the season because the Jags offensive line is so bad that I think the Colts winning this division with Daniel Jones isn't that insane.
It's not, because it's not a great division. So I could see that happening for sure. My thing though is that there's these outs of, if they underperform, I think Steichen's probably got the shortest leash in the league right now, or at least one of them, right? And so, if that happens, you would think they would want to see what they have in Anthony Richardson before, or at least showcase him a little bit and get.
Yeah, his only eject button at that point is, look, Anthony Richardson, I made him an average quarterback. That's the only option he would have.
And if Anthony Richardson is the dude down the stretch, that's not good for the pass catchers on that team from a fantasy perspective. So, that's where I also just have in the back of my mind how this could go with Indy. Obviously, it can go the other way, and maybe you're right that not to say that was your prediction, but maybe what you said comes to fruition where they are more competitive, and because it is a weaker division. But we'll see. It'll be one of the teams that we are definitely pretty interested in. All right, some final thoughts, some parting thoughts. I just came with 4 things that I wanted to just say before we close this thing up. Number 1, I kind of mentioned this. I wish I went a little bit heavier on the elite quarterbacks, especially in that 3rd round range. Number 2, I think that I have to come to grips and be okay with some late round convictions not paying off if I'm going to get the payoff in others, right? I can't sit here and be like, oh no, Jalen Wright, but then sit with such great exposure to Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I think that anyone in my position would probably just rather take this, would take the, instead of just being 6% Jalen Wright and, 5% JCM, you'd probably want to be 12% JCM at those prices with an 18% Jalen Wright, and then hope that Bill ends up just being that guy, So I need to, I need to at least be real with myself and try to be level headed that this is just what happens with late round picks. I probably do wish though that this is number 3, that I had a little bit more conviction with my plays. But like I said, I do think that this is a really good sleepers year and a good year for just value across the single, the later single digit rounds at wide receiver and stuff. So I'm not shocked that my exposure looks the way that it does. And then the final thought is, here are the teams that are probably going to help my bags the most. It's the Patriots, it's the Packers, the Jags, the Panthers, and the 49ers. I think those teams, if they end up doing well and outperforming expectation, things will be good for the best ball portfolio this season. Do you have any parting thoughts, Rich? Like things that pop into mind about the season for you, the summer, what you learned? And because for folks who don't know, Rich is doing all the editing of the show as well. And so he listens very carefully to all of the episodes and also gets a very up close look at all the guests' faces as he edits those videos.
Very much so. One of my favorite points as you wrap it up is, I don't know, I think we are kind of primed for a little bit of an offensive uptick this year across the league. You brought it up on your bold predictions this morning, or hitting the feed yesterday, for people about quarterback play and the amount of quarterbacks that are going to hit a threshold of points. And with guys like Ben Johnson ascending to head coaches at other teams, and teams adapting to, we've seen a couple of years of this too high shell stuff, right? So yeah. I think that offenses are primed better than ever to punish these teams that are playing too deep and then create opportunities for explosives. I mean, that's what the Lions have been doing unbelievably well. Everyone thinks of them as, at the same time, a ground and pound team with Gibbs and Montgomery, but they also create all these explosive passing plays, right? Yeah. Which incongruence is really hard to wrap your head around, because it's really hard to do both at the same time. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm with the Packers being lackluster last year. LaFleur's going to be back at it. I just think that you're onto something with scoring being up around the league, which then obviously trickles down value to some of the later round guys, because they can contribute as well if a lot of these offenses are taking steps forward. Yeah,
just got to hope that quarterbacks can stay healthy, right? Like, as long as they stay healthy.
That's really it, man. Yeah, because like you see these quarterback transactions these last couple of days of guys getting cut. Kenny Pickett going for a 5th round pick. Yeah. It's like there is such a dearth of quality backup quarterback. And I get it. It's the hardest position to play in sports. So yeah, fingers crossed. Let's keep these guys healthy and keep the points up.
Yeah. All right. So no guests this week. So Rich, tell everyone where they can find you, what you're doing during the season, because I know you got some stuff going on, all that good stuff.
First and foremost, Late Round FF across all social channels, as JJ said. Those vertical videos, you can think of me typing away and editing in Premiere as those guys get posted. But yeah, Gridiron Gamble. This week, we're looking at week 1 and looking at scenarios. What are we looking for to go on? We've had months of predictions and thinking, but what specifically can change our opinions on these teams for week 1. And then from there on out, every week we are entering a $1,000 Circa Sports Million card, 5 picks against the spread. Our attempt to try to win $1 million.
Where can people find that?
Gridiron Gamble across all platforms. One word on social, and then just Gridiron Gamble. Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you guys get your stuff.
Perfect. All my stuff is over on lateround.com. Make sure you are purchasing the draft guide. One more update for the draft guide, and then we're good, because cuts are happening and trades are happening and all that stuff. But the draft guide is still for sale. The prospect guide is only $9.99 right now. If you guys want to learn some of these prospects and see what I had to say, about like an Ollie Gordon and such, back in May. Make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for a great season. Thanks for listening and giving us feedback. And it was just a joy. It was just a really fun season and a really fun series to do once again. We hope that we get to do it again next year. I'm sure we'll do a recap episode like we did last season. We'll do one at the end of this year. But we really, really appreciate it. It's been a blast. Thanks for tuning in.